Hey everybody, sorry I can't be with you again on this Wednesday, but here is a very short video, no intro music or no outtakes on this one, just getting straight to the point so you can get working. What you're going to do today is we are going to walk through this piece of paper very quickly together, okay? So hopefully the substitute gave you this, it has this at the bottom, and then this is what's on the back. Hopefully you've got this. If you don't have this, politely ask the sub to give you one. So here's what we're talking about. We're going to begin this new unit, and in this new unit we're going to be tackling what we call the rights and responsibilities of citizens. And so to start, we're going to need to define what exactly civil rights, in another term, civil liberties, what those terms mean. So your paper defines them for you. So you just read what it says. It says, civil liberties are the basic rights and freedoms guaranteed to individuals either explicitly in the Constitution, like they're written in the Constitution, or they're interpreted by courts and lawmakers. I'll move on to the next one, then we'll give some examples. So civil rights, then the next definition, it says, it's the basic right to be free from unequal treatment based on certain protected characteristics, like your race, gender, disabilities, and also this comes up in certain settings, so like in getting a job, like employment, or in housing, finding a place to live. Sometimes we see civil rights becoming an issue, especially when they're violated, obviously. And that's the thing. When we talk about civil liberties and civil rights, the easiest way to tell to clarify what the difference is to talk about violations of somebody's civil liberties or civil rights. And so, if you have somebody's civil liberties being violated, that means that somebody, and it doesn't matter who, and that's the important thing, any person who is not being given something that the Constitution says they should be given. So, for instance, the freedom of speech, for instance. Like if you're told you're not allowed to write a blog post and express your opinion about Congress, or something like that. Like the police knock on your door and say, you can't write that, get that off the internet. That's a violation of your civil liberties. Because in the Constitution, the First Amendment says that we have the right to freedom of speech, the freedom of the press, the list goes on, okay? When it comes to civil rights, those are instances where you are not allowed to do something, usually because of who you are. So if you've got two people, person number one might be allowed to do this, but if you are not allowed to do that same thing, and it's not based on like a real good reason, like for instance, the right to vote. Somebody who's over the age of 18 can vote and you can't. Well, that's because you're younger and we have laws, and that's like okay. But if it's an example of like person A can vote because they're a white man and person B cannot vote because they're a black woman, just for instance, and the reason is because she's a black woman, that's an insane civil rights violation, okay? That's not okay, obviously. So that's where civil rights and civil liberties start to get different. Civil liberties is when anyone's constitutional privileges are not given to them. Civil rights is when they are not given to you based on who you are. You know, your race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, etc. Okay? So that's the key difference. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope that explains the two definitions. Now, these next two questions here, where it asks which amendments of the Constitution deal mainly with our liberties, this is where it gets a little weird and confusing. But the part of the Constitution that we see a lot of our liberties described is in the first 10 amendments. You should write that down. The first 10 amendments. Now, do you remember what we call the first 10 amendments? We call them the Bill of Rights. So here's where it gets a little confusing. The amendments that deal with our liberties are the amendments that we call the Bill of Rights. So these names, liberties and rights, it's so easy to get them all mushed up and confused because our liberties are described in the Bill of Rights. So you just got to understand that the Bill of Rights, if you remember them, there are a lot of things that say what the government cannot do. The government cannot inhibit your freedom of, religion, assembly, press, petition, speech. Your right to bear arms. You need a warrant for the police to search your home. That kind of thing. Things the government cannot do. So if your liberties are not being upheld, well, it's probably because there's a violation of one of those amendments going on. The government's not doing what it said it's doing what it says it should not do. Okay? So the second question, which amendments of the Constitution deal with our rights? That That's found in various other amendments, specifically amendments that have to do with like it'd be like, you know, the 24th Amendment, which says we cannot force people to pay a poll tax. Well, the reason why that is important is because if we force people to pay poll tax, that might limit a poor person's ability to vote. They might not be able to afford that. And so that would be a violation of their civil rights based on their poverty. Likewise, you know, the civil rights, the Civil War amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th amendments. Remember, those are about, you know, slavery is illegal. The 14th Amendment says that, amongst other things, it allows former slaves at least to become citizens, and that also is an amendment that's very important to try to make sure that the people in a state are given fair and equal treatment. So it's about equality, meaning you can't be mistreated or given poor treatment based on your race, things like that. So, again, the 24th Amendment, the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, there are others, but it's sort of the amendments that come after the Bill of Rights that we see a lot of information about our rights. Okay, so here's what you're doing from this point on. Go ahead, do part 3. You're going to come up with 2 scenarios when examples of people's civil liberties being violated and examples of civil rights being violated. So just come up with something, just, you know, a couple sentences, maybe 1 or 2. You look at my example, and then flip it over to the back and run through these. Tomorrow in class, we're going to look at the First Amendment. And we know that the First Amendment gives us the freedom of RAPS, religion, assembly, press, petition, speech. So in no particular order, we are going to look at some very tangible examples of, you know, speech. Can you say this? Is this protected by the Constitution and the First Amendment or not? What about this with religion and press and assembly and petition? So run through these, and all you're doing is putting a yes or no. It's like a guess if you think this thing is actually protected under the First Amendment or not. And then you'll notice the very last one asks about people protesting outside the funeral of soldiers with fairly offensive signs. When you get to that point and you're done with the guessing, come back here to Canvas and watch the video that's below this one, and there's going to be a discussion that I want you to engage in from that point on. Okay? That's all. I hope that makes sense. Hopefully it shouldn't take you too long, and if you get everything done, then you'll have no homework, okay? I will see everybody tomorrow, and thank you so much. Bye.